the thing that I remember is one night sitting at my desk and crying because I realized that I didn't own the company. And at the same time, it was like one of those moments where you say, shake off the past, embrace the future, and move forward.
This is the Insurance Technology Podcast, where we bring interesting people from across the insurance ecosystem to discuss and debate technology's impact on the industry. Join us each episode for insights and best practices from industry stewards and tomorrow's innovators. Now, here's your host, Reid Holsworth.
Welcome to the Insurance Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Reid Holsworth. This episode, I'm interviewing Doug Roller. A lot of you know Doug. A lot of you don't know Doug. Doug is one of the missing pieces in this whole tale of the original founders of insurance technology. When you start to piece all this together, it's really interesting. All of the people in that generation, if you will, during that time, were all connected, and all the things that they went off to do. You'll see it. You'll see those connections. You'll hear the same names come up. And hey, surprise, these are people that I've already interviewed on this podcast. So it's really interesting. You know what I find most interesting about all of this, which it's always baffled me, and part of the reason why I wanted to put this whole podcast together, is that all of these people are such good people. They really are. And they really care about the industry. They care about other people. They care about their customers. And they're just overall solid folks. And you'll see that. In this episode, we really get to know Doug personally, about him growing up as a child in rural Texas, his father, the DJ and the minister. Then we'll hear about how he completely changed his career path when he got a glimpse of an Apple computer. Pretty cool stuff. And lastly, we're going to get into him building really one of the very first comparative raters in the industry. Stay tuned. Good stuff. Joining us is Doug Roller. Doug, for those of you who don't know, has an amazing career. Doug and I have known each other for, a number of years. And Doug was the former founder and CEO of Duck Creek, among other things that we're going to get into, like Micro Magic. I guess that was the company name back then, Doug, right? And so we're going to get into some really cool stuff. Doug's an amazing individual, great person. So Doug, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Awesome. We're excited to have you. So first, we really want to get into who is Doug Roller, get to understand you as a person, let the audience, really kind of connect with you in that personal way. So Doug, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in the panhandle of Texas in a town called Perryton, which is about 10,000 people or so, or it was then. I think it's a little smaller now. 1954. I think it's got to be the hottest and coldest place in the world. It's very strange. It's up on a high plain. It's totally flat. They say you can see 3 days in every direction, which I think is about true. We used to sit on the porch and look at. You could see an elevator, a grain elevator, on the horizon that was 14 miles away. So,
oh, wow.
When you had just the right atmospheric conditions. So I was the oldest of 5 kids. My mom and dad were both teachers when they were married. They were teaching on the GI Bill at that time. And shortly after that, my dad was down in Perryton visiting a relative, and he saw this radio station, and it just grasped him, and he decided he was going to become a DJ. And about a year after he was there, he came back and began working at that same radio station in Perryton. My mom was mostly a mom at home, but she occasionally worked as a store clerk after that. I love my dad and what he did because everybody knew him. The town was only 10,000 people, so that was easy to do.
So you became like a celebrity child all of a sudden in Barrington, Texas.
That's true. One of the most embarrassing moments I ever had was he was always asked to MC everything, banquets, whatever. And he got the spelling bee one year when I was in about the second or third grade. And I had won my grade level. And I was on the stage, and my dad was giving the numbers or the words out to the attendees. And I missed the very first word the very first time around.
No!
There are those payoffs for. I'm sure my dad was totally gracious about it and never said a word, other than to just build my confidence back. So I always appreciated that. Thought it was a great example. I had 5 or 4 siblings as well. We were pretty close. The world changed after my dad went into the ministry when I was just about to turn 12.
Oh, wow.
So our life went from being in one place to being in 5 or 6 places over the next 6 years from the time I was about a 6th grader on. We lived in several different places. I think I attended 7 schools in that period of time.
Oh, wow.
So it was quite a difference. But when I left for college in 1972, was the first time after that I was in one place for that length of time. So I graduated from high school or college with an MA in English literature, and I taught middle school for a single year. This was also the year that I met my wife, Linda, and we settled down and for just 1 year there, and then got the idea that we were going to go to Dallas and work on PhDs. And this is kind of where the story of my computer world begins. Is we had a strange thing happen. We needed part-time jobs. I got a job as a manager of a bookstore. Linda got a job as I don't know what you would call her, a helper for an oil millionaire and his wife. They were both quite old at the time. And so we settled down there, and one night while we had our own house. It was nicer than any house that we lived in for several years after that on their estate. He grew tulips for a hobby, and he had greenhouses of tulips on this acreage, which was right in downtown Dallas. Wow. And we had our own house. He just gave us a house, gave us a home, paid Linda pretty well. It was hard for us to leave, although Linda had a hard time staying because the woman was not the easiest to get along with. But we stayed there a year until one night in 1980. Let's see, what year would it have been? 77. 1979. We were watching a PBS teleauction, and see, was it 70? Yeah, it was 79. And I had, you'd kind of walk around there. They're long, and most of the time they're, instead of showing the show that's on, they're doing auctions. And so when that happened, we would always walk out and go, refill our coffee cup. Sometimes the segments were so long you could have gone out and changed your tire or done any number of things that you wanted. But when I came back in, there was an Apple II PC on the screen. I had no idea what a computer even was at the time. I had never seen one, touched one, and I saw this computer, and it had some kind of a fancy diagram or chart or something on the screen that was being generated by the computer onto a TV, which sat separate from the Apple. And I was completely taken aback, mystified, wondered what this thing was, and almost immediately knew that I had to have one. It was like an epiphany when something like that happens. And so that's how I got into the computer world. And I'll stop there. I've kind of outstretched.
No, that's wild. I didn't know any of this. So you're English lit major, taught middle school, then we're managing a bookstore, then somehow like figured out a way to go work for some billionaire and live on his massive palatial estate where he grew tulips for fun in downtown Dallas.
Yeah, we went there to work on our PhDs. Neither one of us got very far.
And then one day saw the magical Apple II on TV and said, "This is it. This is what I want to do." Like this.
Oh my gosh, that's exactly it. Yeah,
that's awesome. We're gonna get more into that in a minute. So what did you want to be when you grew up? Like when you were a child, what did you want to do?
Well, this is going to sound really weird, and I think it also places me on the spectrum. I wanted to be a washing machine.
What? A washing machine?
I wanted to be a washing machine. So when I was a little kid, we had a front-loading washer, and I would sit. I'm told this. That I don't remember all of this. I just go on what I've heard. I would sit there for hours and watch the clothes turning inside the washing machine. And so when later on I gave it up, and decided I would try to find a more practical career. And the weird thing about it was that when my son was born about 30 years later, he also was captivated by washing machines.
That's wild.
Unfortunately, he had a top loading and I had a front loading, so it was a little easier for me.
Which I would have thought, based on the age, it would have been opposite. Like I would have thought more top loading back then and front loading now.
Yeah,
that must have been more advanced. Like I didn't know they had front loaders back then. We
did. Yeah, there was a front. We had a front loader, and Bryson, he would go and bring a stool in and take it and get up and stand on top of it and look down into the top loader. But he had to open it up.
Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah.
So it was a little different. He had harder technology to work with.
So in my house, I have, to be honest, I have 2 washers and dryers. Do you have like 6 of them and all different makes and models? And you just like sit in there and it's like you have like a lazy boy. You just like sit.
We opened a museum. You can walk around from room to room and pay to see the different washing machines. We had a Westinghouse. Every model that was out there, we tried to keep.
Seriously?
Not really. I was just running with your joke there.
No, that's wild though. I wonder what that was. Just the colors and the things moving and just the water. And I don't know. I'm kind of trying to understand that.
I also spun pan lids. And so at a point a few years ago, I read a book on autism and the spectrum. And it talks about that. And it dawned on me that, some sort of relationship between what people on the spectrum do and what fascinates them that sort of sets them apart from others. Often those people turn out to be, very talented. Mm-hmm. Some not because of related problems, but it explained a little bit to me, and also I think helped me become a little more self-aware because I was quite an introverted child in many ways, and it became clear to me why that was. So.
Wow, that's wild. So you've just now kind of realized that reading this book recently?
Well, I had read the book. It's been about 5 years, I'd say, and I've talked to other people, and it's very it's a very interesting thing that often the things that are our best gifts can also be burdens at time, or can affect us in other ways. And that's definitely the case in my case. There are things that I see myself doing that I understand are good and are about the spectrum. And then I do things, other things I think from time to time that aren't such. So anyway.
Wow.
So that's my spinning years. They were good years.
That's wild. That's wild. Hey, and your dad was a disc jockey, right? A DJ.
So there was that. That was great fun. So for 1 year, my mom went to work, and she was working during school time. And so my dad would pick me up from school every day and go back to the radio station. And I think by this time he had become the manager, or I was probably in the first or second grade. It was kindergarten and then first and second grade. He would just take me back to the break room, and I would stay there and read, or my brother and I, on a couple of occasions before we were caught, would drink the remaining dregs out of the Dr. Pepper bottles, which we had no idea that how bad that could be. But anyway, I enjoyed a lot of time with my dad, and he would then let me go into an unused studio and play all the records. And at that time, so I could go in and listen to the current hits, and it was really cool. And I spun the record myself on the big Gerard platters that they had, and it was really fun time as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what about hobbies, sports? What are you into, Doug? Then, now, whatever.
I've always loved science, and I think at the bottom of a lot of things that I've pursued, science is one. So there was a period of time where between the time I was about 7 or 8 and the time I was 10 or 12, for each Christmas I would ask for something. We didn't have a lot of money at that point, but I got a telescope one year, a microscope another year, and each year I would add to my science collection a chemistry set that allowed me to mix sodium ferrous cyanide and ferric ammonium sulfate or whatever, make blue liquid, and go, oh, wow, that's amazing how that happens. And so I also love to read, and my parents had all of the Reader's Digest condensed books at the time. And some of those I would read. Some of them I probably shouldn't have, but I did anyway. And so I always loved reading, but I was a little selective in that. I played basketball as I got older, and played for the varsity team when I was in high school, very small high schools. But I've always loved basketball. I love playing it, or did love to play it, and still love to watch it. My two brothers also, we played a lot of basketball in the yard as well, or on a goal by the garage.
Do you continue to watch basketball now? Are you into like the NBA or anything like that? I'm
more into the college basketball scene than the professional. Although we have a house in Brooklyn, and which is really close to the Barclays Center, which is where the Nets play. And
nice.
I'm definitely plan to go see a basketball game there sometime. So
awesome.
Running, I took up when I was in my early 30s, and I wasn't playing basketball anymore, or as much. And I've run a lot. It was for me, as I got into my career, it was a stress reliever. I also ran with a fellow that I worked with for a while as well. I'll talk about a little bit later, but during that time, I ran a lot of marathons, 30 or so, Boston 3 times, and I found it to be the running for me to be a way to relieve stress, and I continue to do it to this day. Although I haven't run a marathon for I don't know 6 or 7 years, I still do that. Music. I was in a band. I play the guitar and the piano and sing, and so I did that for a number of years, and still love to do that. Write some music as well. And I did put a note in here about one time with David and Dennis during the years that we were growing AMS and its affiliated companies. We were out really late. Now, Dennis, I didn't put anything about this in there, but Dennis used to hold these things he called Cluckers meetings.
And talking Dennis Chikazian, you're talking about.
Yeah, Dennis Chikazian. So, and Dennis would work all day, and then he would call meetings in the evening, and you'd be in those meetings a lot of times the rest of the night. So he would order Cluckers. And that's so they became known as the Cluckers meetings, and both the CNA staff and then David and I were sort of like guests there. I know David much more than I was ever there, but the few times that I was there, it was really interesting, and it just revealed so much of why Dennis is Dennis and how brilliant he is. Mm-hmm. But he at the end of it one night, it was very late, and we didn't have reservations. David and I don't think, maybe we did have, but for some reason we started talking about music, and Dennis said, well, let's go over to it's probably midnight by now. And he says, let's just go over to the house and play. He says, my boys play as well. And so we went to his house. We rode in the back of a pickup at midnight in Chicago. David and I did.
David Rowe we're talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about David Rowe. And so yeah, that was an interesting experience as well. And then when we got there, he went and woke up his sons, Jeff and Mike, I believe.
Yep.
And we played music, Buddy Holly, and just stuff like that. That was easy, and it was again just one of those memorable nights. I don't know how Dennis's wife could have not, or she had to have awakened at some point, but she because it was so loud. She is a
saint. I mean, she tells me that Dennis does not, like, he gets up at 3 a.m. every day to work. Like, the guy just doesn't sleep. I mean, when does he sleep? I mean, and it's craziness.
It's amazing. It is amazing.
You know, what's funny is I believe that Jeff and Mike still have a band. It's like the Willbillies or something like that, because they're in Wilmette, and it's something like that. Yeah, I recall. So they're still all doing it. It's hilarious. They're such a great family. They really are.
It's perfectly consistent with Dennis. To do that. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. So a lot of things. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff. So all right. Let's let the big question. How did you end up in the insurance software industry, or really insurance? You know, from managing a bookstore and middle school teacher to all these things. How did you end up in insurance software?
Well, so when I the night that I saw I didn't tell you that the night that I saw the auction for the PC, for the Apple II Plus, I thought, I got to have that. So I asked Linda, can I call in a bid? And she said yes. And I bid like $400. It was the most money I thought I could do. Well, it sold for much more than that.
Oh, wow.
And it made
a lot.
So yeah. I thought, how am I going to get one of these things? I'm getting ready to go to grad school. I'm going to be in grad school for, for working on a PhD for maybe 3 or 4 years. I'm not going to make a lot of money doing that. So I thought, if I'm going to do it, I've got to find a way to do it. And I decided that Well, I was actually visiting with my parents at their home, and my mom had an art store there that she operated, and I went in to see her there when we were visiting, and a guy came in named Max Miller who had an insurance agency and was actually the owner of that building, and I started talking to him, and he said that it was for sale, and I thought, gee. I started asking questions about, well, what do you need for it? He said he would carry most of the down payment, and I thought I could probably have that computer in my hands within a few months if I did that. And so I just did a complete 360 in terms of my life. And Linda, my wife, has been just amazing. She just said, sure, let's do it. And so for about a year and a half, I operated the insurance agency until I got my second year's contingency check, I think, came through, and there was enough money on it that I could buy that Apple and feel not too guilty about it.
Wow.
And that then just led to a third thing, which was because I had now had the Apple, I did nothing else. I hired an assistant. It was a small agency. I hired a person. Marilyn Mingus was her name. She was a wonderful person. And she began to take care of the insurance, and I taught myself to program. And just became totally immersed in it for about a year. And this was in the early 80s. And
how did that work? Did you just go down and I'm real question. Like, how do you teach yourself that at that age? I assume you don't go down to the local library and they have books on this stuff.
Well, there were.
I don't know.
Yeah. At that point, of course, the technology was completely new. So there were some hobbyist magazines that were out, and a couple of trades. One Byte magazine was a new magazine. I don't know if they still are out there or not, but they looked at technology. There were some others like creative computing that really went into showing you how to program. So I looked at that, and like many programmers, at some point along the way, I had an aha moment, and I knew why I was doing what I was doing. I also understood the relationship of the processor to the memory, and the relation of the memory to the screens, and how it all worked and what you could do to optimize it. And it was about that time that Linda decided that if I was going to be that busy doing the computer thing, she would take that opportunity to take 3 months and work on her graduate degree in German. Yes, she wow. We met in a German class in college, actually, but she stayed with it and has continued to stay with it. And so she went to Germany that summer and left me home by myself, at which point I did nothing because Marilyn was taking care of the insurance agency. I did nothing but immerse myself in the computer. And when she got home, I showed her what I'd worked on, which were, unfortunately, games. And I had built a little game, there was a game out called Galaxian, and I thought, I'm going to try to build that. So I worked on it a while and got something that looked a little bit like it. And I was proud of this. And Linda went, you said you were going to use this computer to actually make money. What have you done so far?
I made a game.
So I decided, well, okay, I guess it's time to get serious. And the thing I thought about first was how much time I spent doing rate calculations when customers came in. And I thought, there's got to be a way to do this on the computer. So I worked
for the audience. How did that work back then? To do somebody comes in.
Oh yeah. So you had these big manuals. In fact, they hung around for many years, and I think there's still some of them out there. But you had a manual, and it was loose leaf paper because all the pages got replaced periodically with new rates and all kinds of things. But they could be huge, and they might have all the lines of business for the company, or maybe in some cases just a few. So at that point, I just took the manuals from some of the companies that I represented. One was American States, and another one was Travelers. And I took one of them, and I can't remember which one really at this point, and decided I will write a program. And that program will be able to take, it was automobile. So I could take year, make, model, driver risk, all of the different things that you had to do. I figured out how to make a screen. I was probably a little obsessive about making the screens look good. But at some point, because they wouldn't fit, the Apple monitor just held 40 columns of data. And so you couldn't really do it. Well, I found a program called Soft 70 that would let you make 70 columns on a 40-column screen by just making the font smaller and taking fewer dots. So we did that, and that gave us enough space to actually do the rating on the screen. And so I wrote the program, got it working, and Marilyn said, well, why don't you do American States? You've done Travelers, let's do American States. And I started doing the same thing again, and partway through it hit me, this is the same stuff, the same information, almost all of it. Why can't I just figure out a way to just put the rates in and have it work so that I can just write one core program and then use that with every company I had. So I went completely back, threw away everything that I had done and started again and wrote a multi-company rating system. That was then the beginning of what would later become Micromagic. At the time, I had no idea. In fact, nobody sold software at that time. There weren't companies out selling this kind of thing. I mean, there were a couple of other companies like ours in the rating space. One that was in the Chicago area, another one on the West Coast I think one was called Command. And it was a really time when you could just think about all these things that you could do, but there just wasn't anyone that had ever done them before. So that's how the original comparative rating system was.
So let's for the audience, that was then you literally built the very first for your agency comparative rater.
Well, maybe not the first, but certainly one of the 3 or 4 that were scattered around the country, and we probably did more with ours. Well, there was the other companies did as well, but was that the other companies that had built that? Like you mentioned a couple of names. Did they do that for the carriers themselves, or did they do it for the agency like you did in order to kind of help you be more efficient as an agency? I think they were done both ways. But anyone who stayed in it long would have realized that the market that was lucrative was doing it for the agents because they're all over the place.
Right.
So you could have hundreds of potential customers in a state, right away, which is what happened to us ultimately when we went to market. Now we're a long ways from that in terms of what happened next, but at some point, I showed what I was doing to, I think it was the American States field representative. By the way, that company's no longer, it's merged with other companies along the way. Mm-hmm. But So because of that, I began to show him what we had been working on. And he said, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And he said, so he actually said, "I'd like to tell some of my agents about it." So he went out and told agents, and they started calling me, the agents, and saying, I hear you have this thing. We'd like to buy it." And I got irritated because I didn't know I actually had a product right now that was going to sell that. I mean, I thought I need to work on this more. There's more work that should happen, but these guys wanted it now. And
well, it's also, you said a minute ago, you said you really kind of over-engineered the UI of it and the screens and whatnot. So I assume too, you're kind of frustrated, like, wait a second, no, this is not ready for others to like use. Like,
there
this
was
is
all
not,
that, yes.
This is not gold-plated, basically, right?
And really, I hadn't figured out, I hadn't taken the time to even think about the financial model, the potential financial benefits of doing that.
Right.
And so this was like an aha moment that took place a bit later. But pretty soon we were selling rating systems to a few agents. And then one of them had the nerve to ask me to write one for a company I didn't represent.
Oh.
So suddenly I've got the problem of, this isn't going to be just Doug selling software out of an insurance agency. We're going to have to do this as a company if we're going to do it, and that's what happened. And I don't know how to talk about or what order we should talk about this versus Duck Creek, because it's almost like you go through this whole process twice with two different ahas.
It's great though. I mean, look, so you built it. Did you founded the company? Was the company, and I don't actually know this, was the company founded as Micro Magic? You started at the actual software company, and then did you walk from the agency? How did that all work? And then I know where this ended up, and I know where it goes, but for the audience, how did that all?
So it happened to be that Seymour was a town with a lot of apple orchards, the town where we were located at that time in Missouri. And so when it came time to name the agency, I named it the Apple Agency. And people thought, for the Apple computer, but actually, no. I don't think we'd actually come up with a name yet or knew that we were going to even have a business of that sort. So when it did become clear that there was a business there, then about the same time, and it's always interesting, maybe people come in and just don't notice them at times that have the talents to maybe help you do something. But a guy named Jim Murrow, who lived near Seymour, came in to buy insurance. And I started talking to him, and he said, well, that's interesting. It turns out that Jim had been a marketing guy at Procter & Gamble and had retired, and not retired really because he was too young to retire. He was under 40, I think, at the time. But he said, you could sell that. You should be thinking about how to sell it and what to do. And so I had my first employee, but I didn't have any money to pay him. But I said, I'll give you a percentage of the company, and he took it. And at the same time, we were struggling about how we're going to build all of this, because now we had people in Oklahoma calling us. So not, even if you had Allstate was different in Missouri than it was in Oklahoma.
Right.
And so each time you did it, you were going, oh my gosh. So suddenly we had demand, but no supply, not enough. So at about that same time, I hired a programmer, a guy named Bob First, who was going to Missouri State University at the time. I I can't remember if it was Missouri State or still SMS. But anyway, he became our first hire. And again, since on the technical side, and I couldn't pay him, but I said, I'll give you a percentage of the company as well, which he took. And so he began to write the programs. We moved them off the Apple and onto the IBM PC as well, so we could work with both markets. And that, then I think you could look at that part of our past and say that's a point that you would say, okay, that was the kickoff of MicroMagic. It turned out to be astonishingly successful from the standpoint of every agent needed it. A much different kind of market, say, than a platform that we would develop later for Duck Creek. Mm-hmm. This was lots and lots of little sales that repeated because the agent had to keep it up to date. We had a big concrete block room. We built a building and put a concrete block room in it where we could store the manuals because the insurance manuals were useful. We had a librarian. We made it fireproof. Oh, wow. And over time, I don't know, there were thousands of manuals in that room, and they had to be updated. So there were people that we hired to do the updating. We had people who sat on top of maps that were big area maps that we found somewhere, and would get zip codes so that we could map out where the rates changed and given, which zip code to use with which factor, and so forth. So there were people doing that. So it was almost like a manufacturing operation. And so if you think about how it had to work, and within a few years, it was definitely, we could tell that it was going to be successful. Now, some of that happened sort of out of sequence to some things I could talk to you about. I just don't know. You're going to have to kind of help me out to know where you want to stop and go on to the next thing. But I'm going to avoid talking about Duck Creek right now.
Yep.
And just say that in 1986, we were probably in 3 or 4 states with the rating. We hadn't built a building yet. We were just we were working in a room or in a garage, really, where people painted automobiles and did all kinds of stuff that actually made our programmers a little high, I think.
You were in an auto body shop.
But yes, it was just a very interesting environment. An old building. We put a sign up that said MicroMagic on the door. We had about, 20 employees at some point, and they were, tracking rates for so many companies. Well, David Rowe and Dennis, as you already know, were doing their thing. And at some
at the time, Dennis was CEO and David was CTO of Siemens.
Correct? Yes, I'd say that's correct. I'm not as familiar with the titles, but yeah. But David ultimately became CEO of AMS, and by the time we met each other, and I'm not even sure now how that happened. Yep. But at some point, I think what happened was we were looking at markets. So one market was Chicago, and one was the East Coast. And so I had made visits to Chicago to see Bob Eustace.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Tom's
yep.
brother. And we visited. He was in the basement of his house.
For those who don't know, Doug, who is Bob Eustace?
So Bob was the founder of Applied Systems. Mm-hmm. So very early, the founder of AMS, David, and the founder of Applied, they were actually friends, and it was very interesting. So they were doing their work out of a house, and in the basement it was all. And I got thinking it was Bob's house, in a place.
Was it in University Park? We'll have to fact check that, but I think it was.
Well, his house might have been. I think the name of the town was Moni, which might have been where University Park was. That was the address, I think, on something that I remember sending to him at some point. But so he was doing a policy admin system. It was the first one, and I remember his catchword on his marketing stuff was get yourself into command, or hire yourself a commander or something. And I don't remember how. No, it was they call themselves applied. No, it was agency manager was what it was. So his blurb on his ads was hire yourself an agency manager, and that was the system that they built. And
it was that was I don't know. I should know this. I think the first one was TAM, and so that which was the agency manager.
Yes, that's what they call it. The agency manager.
By the way, I believe there's still it's insane. There's tens of thousands of users that still use TAM today.
Oh yeah.
It's still there. It's still
the same as with AMS. Which, right. Vertafore and all of the. So there's all of this going on. It's in its very early days, but we are all bumping into each other at conferences or wherever we happen to be, and it was a very interesting time. I mean, you knew things were happening, but you didn't know how fast they would happen. But
So then David and Dennis. So then really, that was probably after David had left CNA and was founded AMS. Yeah. With David left CNA and was at AMS, and then Dennis, I think, was still at CNA, but the chairman or something of AMS at the point. I don't remember exactly. And so they came out to see. So they came out to see you in Missouri.
Yes. So I went to see them, I think, first, and then they came to see. I'm not positive about that, but they came to see us, and I'm not sure whether Dennis came the first time. I think it might have been just David, but we hit it off pretty well right away. And David is such a smart and sincere and thinking person. And he immediately, his mind is just full of diagrams. I think he can sit at the board and draw diagrams so quickly and start putting things together. Well, he began to think about, what if AMS, and he wasn't really thinking applied at all at this point.
Mm-hmm. He was running AMS.
He was running AMS, and so what he's thinking is, we could sell a rating to everybody who bought a AMS management system. Mm-hmm. And so they talked to us about selling. We sold for too little. We shouldn't. Too small and too fast, which was a lesson you learn the first time around. Sometimes we learned all of ours the hard way, I think. But in terms of what we learned about insurance and the bandwidth that David's organization was able to bring, just getting to know David and his team and all the things there, while there were moments of conflict, as always are when you have certain amounts of money and you can put them in one place or another, and you're no longer. The thing that I remember is one night sitting at my desk and crying because I realized that I didn't own the company anymore. And at the same time, it was like one of those moments where you say, shake off the past, embrace the future, and move forward. And, there are a lot of really, really great things happened then between, say, 1986 and really up until maybe 95 or 96, the next 10 years. And
I feel like, Doug, that time, it's just kind of amazing. You have like the Eustace brothers, you have Dennis, you have David, you have yourself. You were working with, I mean, Hackbarth was there, right, at that time as well?
He was there, yes. Jim was there for I'd say a couple of years, 3 years, maybe. I'm not exactly sure now but yes, Jim was also part of that group. So we all knew each other, and we have some funny stories that you could tell about that. But
it's just so amazing to me, like the group of people and everybody was there, and then how all of you guys have all gone off and done amazing, huge things, and still are very involved, which we'll get into in a second. But it's just really amazing. And you know what a lot of people don't understand? I've probably said this in prior episodes, but like you guys are all such amazing people. And I'm not just saying that. Like you're really, really good-hearted, good people. Like David, Dennis, Jim, yourself. I mean,
great people.
You guys are like, I mean, these are like salt of the earth people, and it's just kind of amazing, and it's funny because along the way, I will say, and I do know, like stuff that's not on some of these episodes, is there isn't always the nicest people within this industry. There has been some people that have not been that great along the way, right? None of which will be on here, but it's funny. It's like it's almost like it attracted kind of this great group of people that all went off to do big, successful things in so many ways. I'm only naming a few of them, but like you know what I mean. It's just it blows my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think back on it, and it seems almost like magic just thinking about it. That all of it happens to sort of congeal in the way that it did. And so that whole environment, I think, continued to flourish for a number of years. In, I guess it was 1995 or 6, things had gotten big, and things were being divided up, and part of our organization went elsewhere, and some, there are just a lot of things that were going on. And
things that AMS you're talking about.
Yeah, AMS was going through some growing pains. And David, at some point as well, took a role at CNA. That might have been just a bit later. But I decided that maybe I thought at the time I might be retiring, that I might do, and that I was going to do what I thought about doing initially, which was teach school again.
Oh, wow.
So I left AMS, I think it was in 1995. We have a big operation in Bolivar, Missouri, which is near Seymour, where the original office was. And we probably had 200 people there at the time. And that just continued on. They continued to manufacture rates and build things. And my brother and Bob first was still there. There were a number of people who continued. I spent the next several years doing several things, and it's a whole different story. So I'm not going to go there. But in 1999, my brother John and a few other guys got hold of me, and we sat down and talked one night. And he said at that point, AMS was going through a difficult time. And one person I think that at some point you would be interested in talking to, who also came along at a great time for AMS. David was gone. A lot of the original people were gone. Some had died. And the company then, as it was going through these troubles, hired at some point Ewan Menzies. I think this was probably about maybe 2001 or 2002, somewhere in there, maybe 2000. But Ewan Menzies and John Ashenhurst are two names, I think, for you to think about at some point. they came into the AMS world, which had become a little turbulent at times, and they started making order out of chaos a little bit. I mean, there was some painful things, and that's what really brought about Duck Creek, was that it became painfully clear that the big office in Bolivar, Missouri, that supported rating was not going to survive. That it would be consolidated with other things on the East Coast, and so that was kind of the beginning of the Duck Creek phase.
Wow, that was awesome. It always amazes me the path that people go down in life. Doug going to school to be a teacher, to being a middle school teacher, to then managing a bookstore, which then he ended up living on this billionaire's palatial estate. But then, like a lot of us, fell into insurance, taught himself how to code, built one of the first comparative raters. It's awesome stuff. But that wasn't it. Doug said, hey, let's go after it and let's do the next thing. And what was that? That became Duck Creek. For those of you who don't know who Duck Creek is a big success story, recently going public, and it's one of the largest insurance technology companies in the world. Really, really amazing stuff. And what a great story. Stay tuned.